episode of Thought That Get Results. I'm Reverend Webbo Herbert, and as per usual, we're here every Tuesday evening with something that at least we think is of community interest and or of some concern. And if you think that you have something which fits into that category, you'd like to find out how you can be a part of the program, well, why don't you drop us a line, address it to Let's Talk Program in care of Vaughan Radio, P.O. Box 195, Charlestown in Nevis, or give us a call. Our numbers are 1-869-469-1616 and or 1700. Here's a suggestion. You have a question or comment, perhaps you can get a pencil, a piece of paper, write it down so that you're well organized, and when you're getting on the show, you take as little time as possible so that we can accommodate as many of you as we can. We ask only, first of all, you respect yourselves and then respect others, because we will not accept anything we deem that's not within our broadcast standards, but we encourage you to always be forceful with your point. Again, thank you all for joining us. Your voice in the community, Thought That Get Results. You can also follow or participate on our numbers 1-869-469-1616. Follow the video stream of this show on our Facebook page at Vaughan Radio and our YouTube channel at Vaughan Radio. Thank you all again for joining us. Your voice in the community. Tonight, the Honorable Cleone Stapleton Simmons. Good evening.
Good evening, Mr. Herbert, and thank you so much for having me as your special guest this evening. Good evening to the listening audience.
The first time, I think, but certainly it won't be the last, right? That you've been on this show.
Certainly.
Okay, certainly what? It would be the last?
Certainly, it would certainly not be the last.
So, it is true it is the first.
It is the first, indeed.
And it's true it won't be the last.
Definitely.
It's so good to have you.
Thank you.
Okay, so the Honorable Cleone Stapleton Simmons is the elected representative for Nevis 5 in the Nevis Island Assembly. Second time around. You were elected first when?
I was elected first on March 5th, 2020, after a by-election.
And then again?
And then again on December 12th, 2022.
Okay.
For the local elections.
Okay, so that is how you have become and are the representative for Nevis 5.
Yes, okay. That's correct.
So why don't we do this? Because not necessarily to all of the audience, but this particular audience, everybody does not know you. Mm-hmm. So why don't I give you the opportunity to let them know who you are, as much as you like us to know, and then having done that, we will get into further details of why we're here.
Certainly. I am Honorable Cleone Stapleton Simmons. I am the elected representative for Nevis 5, that is St. Thomas's Parish constituency. I am an attorney by profession. I am also a mother of 2 wonderful boys. I am also married. My husband is Nigel Simmons. I am from the wonderful village of Cotton Ground, born and raised. And basically, I'm just, truly an island girl. I got involved in politics perhaps almost three years ago, under the umbrella of the Nevis Reformation Party. And so I am indeed, and perhaps still is, very grateful for that opportunity to really be able to represent people, to give what I have, my contribution to the island of Nevis and to the political arena. I think it's always a good initiative and endeavor when we have young people coming in to make their contribution to politics and to have their say and to give of representation, give themselves to represent people in a meaningful way. And so at the end of the day, for me, my political journey thus far has always been and will continue to be about the people of Nevis. I do believe that the times now are very trying. We are having some very difficult times in our history in Nevis. We are going through some very strong, I would say, economic turmoil, and I think that is a direct resultant of the COVID-19 pandemic. And so now we are just trying our best as a nation, a small nation, to really reset, redirect and refocus and try our best to cope with the economic landscape in this particular side of the globe. And so for me, I'm just here basically to be for the people, to try my best to represent them, try my best to hear their concerns and to address them where I can. And that really is the focus for me, Mr. Herbert, in a nutshell.
By profession, you are?
I am an attorney by profession. And so for now, almost going on 10 years, I believe it's almost 8 or 9 years, I can't remember precisely. But yes, I am an attorney. I am the owner or principal of CTS Simmons Legal Chambers that is located on Government Road. In the immediate past, I have served as a banker, more specifically a compliance officer for both Bank of Nevis Limited as well as Bank of Nevis International. I have also been a past teacher at the primary school level. I taught at Charleston Primary School for just about 2 years, as well as the Charleston Secondary School and the Nevis Sixth Form College.
You said you got into politics a few years ago.
Yes.
Not everybody wants to venture in that area. How do you get in?
Well, basically, it's dependent on the person. Really, first of all, you have to have an interest in becoming involved in elective politics. And more so, it's about the community or the constituency, whether they would accept you. So for myself, I was recommended by the former Premier of Nevis, Mr. Joseph Parry. And upon that recommendation, I went to the constituency, of course, and I did present myself that I had an interest, knowing fully well that Mr. Parry was on the verge of retiring from active politics. And so I got involved. I have always been a supporter. My family has always been a very strong supporter of NRP. Mr. Herbert, I know you're very familiar with my grandmother, the late Eulalie Moore Libert, and she was perhaps one of the, I would say, more of a hidden stalwart of the Nevis Reformation Party, in the sense that she was not active perhaps in her later days of being involved with the party and things like that. But I grew up knowing her to be more involved behind the scenes in terms of cooking, being a chef, cooking for party events. My uncle, Vaden Jones, he was more involved. I remember him from a very tender age being involved in NRP Youth Arm. I believe he served as the president. My young memories, if I remember well, and collectively I recall him working alongside people like Idona Brown and Sharon Hobson. Those are the people that I can remember from as early as perhaps the age of 5, being involved in NRP Youth and being around NRP. So I have always known NRP as the political party that my family supported. And so naturally, when I grew up, I believe, as part of the culture here in Nevis, that, I naturally supported the Nevis Reformation Reformation Party as well.
And getting involved, you said, from a community aspect, and you love people.
Certainly.
And you find that that's a way to share in the community. There is a stigma, though. Not everybody want to venture into politics. It's rough stuff.
Yes.
And women in particular haven't really come forward because of the rough stuff.
Yes.
But you got in.
I did.
You've been in it for a few years.
For a few years actively. For me, I have always been involved in politics. From a very early age, I love politics. I love issues, dealing with issues. I love people. I love talking to people. I love sharing ideas. And that is all part and parcel of politics.
And would you say part and parcel of politics also is the rough stuff, why some people do not want to get in?
I believe so. I always hear people say growing up that, politics is nasty, it's dirty, it's not something that one would expect, quote unquote, decent people to get involved in.
Have you experienced any of that rough stuff?
Of course I have. Certainly. I believe if you're a politician, especially an elected representative, you certainly would experience rough stuff. You'll have difficult times. Not everybody would agree with you. There are times when you may take stance that people will perhaps coin as being controversial, and so it is politics at the end of the day. It's an emotional thing. It has to do with perceptions, what people believe, what they don't believe, what they see, what they understand, and so that is the nature of politics. So of course, I have experienced what you coin, Mr. Herbert, as tough stuff, but I believe that for any politician, especially the great politicians, you do not reach that level of greatness unless you meet adversity, and I believe adversity is what really creates strength and really makes a politician or a parliamentarian and so every other politician that I know they have experienced at some point in their political life or career some sort of challenge or adversity. At the end of the day, what makes you or breaks you is how you are able to deal with that. And for me, the focus really is not so much on myself, but always on the people who elected me to represent them.
When you ran this last time in 2022, which was the full election, when you got in, it was a by-election.
Yes.
And so you had a full seat, and you referenced the Nevis Reformation Party, and you did run under that banner.
Yes.
And one of the advantages that your party campaigned on then was that you had almost a full slate. 80% of your candidates were women.
Yes.
And
right.
so you argued in terms of, when I said you, I mean as part of your
Party,
platform,
yes.
the party, you argued that the men were corrupt, not very good leaders, not good, very good keepers of the purse, and all of the other negatives or weaknesses that men have in leadership. And so you argued that the electorate should elect a woman's slate, if you will, and you were offering 80%. One of your candidates was male. It turns out that of the 5 seats, you got 20% of the seats available.
That's correct.
And you thus, as a consequence, had to form the opposition. You would agree that both in government and in opposition, you have an opportunity to exhibit leadership. because you don't have to be the premier to be a leader. You yourself, just being the representative for St. Thomas, is your leader yourself. Okay, so your party was in the opposition, and so you got a chance to, as a party, present yourself as a unit. How would you classify the opportunity that you and your party got to demonstrate to the electorate that you were right when you suggested to the electorate that if they elect you and your party as a unit, you can provide better leadership than the others?
Thank you so much for that, Mr. Herbert. It is indeed a loaded question, and to put it in context, I perhaps would now say that former party. I have to go back perhaps a bit in time in order to conceptualize what was the thinking at that point in time. I do agree to some extent that the NRP at that time really had a full, almost a full slate of female candidates, and the focus of the campaign was really about women empowerment and being able to give women that opportunity that to have that voice and to represent the people of Nevis in that particular capacity. Now, as it relates to leadership and women in leadership and that whole focus, for me, I believe that leadership, it is something that for some it can be coached, for some it's natural. Some people are just natural leaders, perhaps from birth. And I think any opportunity that a person gets, whether it's in terms of management role, performing in a management role, or any type of leadership role, leadership requires certain qualities. And so at the end of the day, it's not just about being like an overseer or manager. Leadership requires a person to be able to be compassionate, be able to empathize, be able to look at things from different perspectives, all different angles, and then of course be able to make a decision. Because I mean, if you are the leader, people are looking to you for leadership, and so it requires persons to be able to be multi faceted in a sense, because there's a particular dynamic that you must have in order to lead and to inspire and to motivate people. For me, leadership and even in my role as an elected representative, leadership to me is having the ability to be able to motivate and to inspire people in order to evoke certain changes in behavior that one would like to see in society. And that to me is really what leadership is. It's not so much as being the overseer perhaps on a slave plantation and dictating or being a dictator where you tell people do as I say because I am the leader. I believe it's more of being involving people in the process, being able to listen, being able to articulate, being able to command support in that sense where you can get people to see your perspective and to see your way without being overly aggressive, and always being mindful that people are people and we have to respect people as human beings. And so I think that to me is what leadership is. Having
explained to you what leadership is, how would you evaluate the opportunity? You just indicated that you would now say you are a former member of the NRP, correct?
That is indeed correct, because
yes, and so against that background, and against the reasons why you now can say you're a former member, the instances that took place that caused you to be a former member, is it fair, we would say, for one to conclude that based on the activities that cause you to be a former member, can one reasonably conclude that you and your party did not demonstrate the leadership that you discussed, or you just outlined what leadership is?
I think persons are free to conclude whatever it is that they wish to conclude. Whether it is a fair assessment, I think, is somewhat subjective. I mean, that's dependent on the individual person and how they are looking at the situation. Leadership, from time to time, of course, there will be challenges in leadership. People would make decisions based on their own experiences, based on their interpretations of certain things, and of course based on other external factors such as pressures from supporters and different things. Now, for me to say that if one can reasonably conclude that the NRP has not demonstrated leadership, to the best of my knowledge, some persons have concluded that. I tend to agree to a certain extent, because wherever you have a breakdown in any organization or any form of communication, then naturally it goes against perhaps what would have been the agenda in terms of demonstrating leadership. And so that it is a reasonable conclusion to make, but at the end of the day, like I said, it is how you deal with obstacles, how you deal with challenges, how you deal with people that matters at the end of the day.
And challenges come both when you're in opposition and also in government.
Yes.
And when you don't have the actuality, you can basically make educated assessments based on the data that you have.
Yes.
Some people argue that were you to take the helms of government and faced with certain challenges, what you and your party demonstrated then is a good forecast as to what you may have demonstrated were you at the helm of government. Would that be a fair assessment?
You see, the difficulty with that is that one may never know. I mean, of course, persons have said that, and like I said, people are entitled to their views. I cannot necessarily agree with that, because I think, you cannot take one situation that you're dealing with, or looking at those elements, and necessarily apply it to a future context, because we do not know what the situation may have been in a different situation. For example, if NRP had elevated to government.
But you would agree though, that if I am running this radio station and it is perceived that I've done a good job,
yes,
and I were to apply for the position of your campaign manager,
yes,
and I were to put forth to you my organization skills as running a radio station, that will help persuade you one way or the other whether or not you will hire me. You will never know.
I would never know, but based on your experience and your track record,
right?
Certainly,
right. So you make basically that judgment, because the only how you will know is when you actually hire me or not.
Exactly. Right. So it is not.
So based on that, is it not fair for one to say that faced with certain circumstances and difficulties, if you will, as you had indicated earlier, how you deal with them is a good forecaster of who you are?
I think one can definitely say that. The issue is that at the end of the day, how do you deal with conflicts and how do you deal with challenges? The NRP went about with dealing with a particular situation perhaps in a way that if I had the power and the will, and if I was the ultimate decision maker, I would not have dealt with it that way. But for me, people deal with things differently based on their ability, based on their exposure, based on their experience, and of course based on their inherent biases, so to speak.
For the benefit of the persons who are listening, who do not know of what we speak,
yes,
in reference to your having been now declared or referred to as a former member of the Nevis Reformation Party, can you give us just a short description of what happened?
Certainly. So we are referring to the situation which I believe, just to put it in context, the impasse as it relates to the appointment of the leader of the opposition. And so NRP, having contested the election and secured 2 seats, based on section 58 of the Constitution of St. Kitts and Nevis, it qualified the party to be able to have a senator as well as a leader of the opposition. Now, qualifications and things like that, of course, those are conditional. And so the section provided a condition or a circumstance, just to put it in layman's term, where a leader of the opposition can be appointed, provided that that person is able to command the support of at least one other elected member of the opposition. That is a person who does not, or those members who do not support the government. And so that really was the condition or the qualification that was required. Now, as you know, Mr. Herbert, and perhaps the wider audience, the 2 elected members for the NRP at that time were myself and the party leader, Dr. Janice Daniel Hodge. And so Dr. Hodge, even though, to the best of my knowledge, information, and belief, she has never formally requested my support to be the leader of the opposition. She had an interest in being the leader of the opposition, and so there was that perhaps expectation that because she was the leader of the Nevis Reformation Party, that she should automatically be the leader of the opposition. Now, it is an expectation, one that is not necessarily coined in any law that I have seen or that I have been exposed to, or any constitution. But it has been the practice thus far, perhaps in the Federation of St. Kitts and Nevis, as well as the Caribbean. So she, as well as members of the party, members of the executive, they were of the view that she should be appointed as the leader of the opposition, a view which I have expressed over and over and over again that I had no issue with. A matter of fact, I indicated from the onset after the election that I would support her to be the leader of the opposition. However, provided that I had a say as to the nominated senator. Now, that issue really was an issue in 2 parts, okay? Because one, she could not have been appointed as the leader of the opposition unless she had the support of one other member, that is myself. And so therefore, in order for that appointment to be fruitful, I had to indicate to the Governor General that I supported her. And I think somewhere along the line, the qualification or the condition upon which an appointment of the leader of the opposition, how it takes place, I believe it became misconstrued. And so there were different perceptions and different arguments that were put forward. And one being that as the leader of the party, that person should be the leader of the opposition. Now, just to put things in a little bit of clearer context and to piggyback, you would recall, Mr. Herbert, that during the period of 2013 to 2017, that NRP had 2 seats. I believe that the 2 seats were Nevis 5 as well as Nevis 1, St. Paul's constituency, and the representatives at that time were Mr. Joseph Parry as well as Mr. Roberto Hector. And so at that time, there was a qualification under the Constitution for the appointment of the leader of the opposition. And so I believe it was then Mr. Carlisle Powell who was nominated as the senator in the House. And so after 2017, when NRP lost the election and they only was successful in obtaining 1 seat, naturally there was no leader of the opposition. Yes, the NRP had a party leader, but there was no leader of the opposition. Now, fast forward to 2022, December elections again, 2 seats, the qualification exists. For the first time, I believe, and theoretically speaking, the provision under the Constitution was really tested in a way where people now saw that the appointment, and the same goes for the appointment of the Premier of Nevis, it is not necessarily automatic. Okay, you must command the support of your other elected colleagues. And once you have that support, then that the leader of the party or anybody else who have that support can be appointed as either the premier, and for the leader of the opposition, the leader of the opposition. But what is perhaps catalyst in the grand scheme of things is that you must have the support. Okay, so did
you at any time express an interest in being the leader of the opposition?
I did express an interest, not initially, not really per se, but simply because I just sought clarification as to whether the leader as well as the party would have liked me to continue being the leader of the opposition, so to speak. And I say that in inverted commas because at that time I was the lone member
and so you had more experience in Parliament.
Yes, for the Nevis Reformation Party, being in Parliament for almost 3 years before the leader actually won her seat.
And you expressed that interest to whom?
I expressed that interest to the leader of the party, Dr. Janice Daniel Hodge, and I stated that if she was so inclined, if she would like me to continue, seeing that I was already in the Parliament and I was the I don't want to say leader of the opposition, but there was one person, not necessarily more experience, yes, but there was an office of the opposition that was set up. And so even though there was no leader, I was already performing in that role.
Okay.
So naturally, I mean, anybody in my position would have sought clarification or asked, okay, how do you want me to treat with this particular situation? Do you want me to continue, or would you like to be the leader of the opposition? And so that is how it was coined. That is how the question was posed to her.
And she responded.
Yes. And there are some persons who said that that should have never been. I don't understand why. We live in a democracy.
That you should have never asked.
That I should have never asked.
But you asked that question of Dr. Hodge.
Yes.
And she said what?
She responded sometime later, perhaps about, I believe it was around the 28th or the 29th of December. And she indicated that she
Meaning
saw...
about 2 weeks later?
2 weeks later, roughly. That she saw no reason why she should not be appointed as the leader of the opposition, being that she was the leader of the party. Now, I took the time out on numerous occasions to really indicate to her, as well as other persons, that that was really not a qualifying factor Okay, it was an expectation, but when you come down to the legality of it and how the law works, it was not necessarily a qualifying factor based on the Constitution. Of course, that matter then, people saw it, people within the party, people outside the party, they saw it as perhaps, for lack of a better word at this point, an offense or a grievance for one to even consider, asking or perhaps making such a suggestion.
So in effect, she, in her response to you, that was something she wasn't considering.
Sorry,
So
what was that?
In effect, her response to you was something she was not going to entertain.
Yes. And at that point, I had no difficulty with that because, like I said, as the leader, I would have given her that preference. If it is that she wanted to be the leader of the opposition, then naturally, then you can be. Okay, that was not an issue for me. What I did indicate, though, is that I would like to have a say as to who the nominated senator is, and I think just to put it in some context. It goes beyond being the leader of the party. You have to look at the situation or the scenario holistically. So here it is, you have an elected member who is a second time elected member, has been in the parliament, has perhaps more experience, has been functioning in almost a leadership role when it comes to the opposition, even though there was no leader appointed. That was the face of the opposition for NRP. I was the face of the opposition for NRP at that time, and for quite some time before the leader came. Now, when I say opposition, I want to make the distinction because some people may confuse it with being the party in opposition as opposed to the actual office of the opposition. So I'm speaking strictly now about the office itself, okay, the position.
Yes, if Dr. Hodge were to concede and agree with that reasoning, would it also be logical that were you to win enough seats and be in a position to form the government, could you then use the same argument of the fact that you have been in parliament, you have exercised certain leadership and stuff like that, and hence maybe I should be the premier?
I could have used that same argument. There was nothing wrong with the argument. Absolutely nothing. The argument was a strictly legal argument. Would I have done so? Perhaps not. I mean, at the end of the day, and what we are seeing now in politics, I mean, it's a negotiation. It's a negotiation process. For most political parties, those things are really worked out before the election, so that when you go into campaigning and if you win, all of the officers are already, you have some indication as to who would be what, who would be deputy leader, things like that, okay?
When for the leadership of the party, you contested that?
I contested the leadership of the party back in 2020.
Some say that disagreement, or if you want to call it a feud, extends back to the fact that you lost the leadership race at that time.
I think I have heard that. And I think it takes a particular state of mind and a particular type of mentality in order to think that or even to utter it. That is not me. There's no leadership feud for me, okay? I am a natural leader, very confident in my ability to lead anything. So there's no feud or dispute for me. I know my role. I was the deputy leader of the Nevis Reformation Party. I know what I brought to the table in terms of my talents, my experience, my skill. I knew where I met the party and what my contribution was in order to advance the cause for the party. And I think those things cannot be disputed. So in terms of a leadership feud, and people use that, okay, I was not interested in that. Two persons went up for leadership, naturally myself and Dr. Daniel. She was elevated as the leader of the party, and I don't think to this day she can ever say, neither publicly nor otherwise, and if she have said that, it would not be truthful. She cannot say that I have not supported her in any way.
You think that, as you outlined earlier, by the very nature of the party coming together, and organizing to govern,
yes,
there should be give and take.
There should always be give and take.
In the very description, I think you said section 58
yes.
of the Constitution, it allows for that.
It does.
And Dr. Daniel, you're arguing, wants the take. But the compromise where you're saying, well, I'll support you, as the Constitution suggests, and you become the leader of the opposition. But if I have a say in who the senator is, so that it is a team effort.
It's a team effort.
That is your argument.
That is my argument. It really ought to be a collective effort.
So you find that in this particular issue, that Dr. Hodge was not reasonable in a little give.
I believe that if I was in her position, then I perhaps would have looked at the whole. I would have employed perhaps a more holistic approach in terms of dealing with the issue. It was a situation where you have to give and take, and that is the very nature of politics. Sometimes you have to give, sometimes you have to give something in order to get something. That is how it works. That is how it has always worked, and it's really fosters and should fosters, and politics in any democracy should really foster collaboration. And so I felt that if I was in her position, I certainly would have considered a give and take approach. I mean, I don't think that it was detrimental, and I don't think in the circumstances it would have been too much to ask, looking at where you want to go, where you're coming from, and what really was the ultimate goal. And at the end of the day, the ultimate goal really was to be in a position to best serve and represent people, and of course having that collaborative effort in doing so, because at the end of the day it's about people. That's what people want to see. People want to know that their leaders can negotiate, that their leaders can communicate, that they can correspond, that at the end of the day they will be able to negotiate and present them with the best deal in the interest of the people. That is politics. It has to be people focused and never self-centered.
So from that interaction with Dr. Hodge, what did you conclude in reference to going forward, her ability to lead, to compromise, and as a consequence, what conclusion did you make after that episode, if you will, as opposed to what your opinion or your calculation of her as a leader was before?
Mr. Herbert, I note you're trying to put me on the spot with that question. What I will say though in response to it, I'm not going to give you a direct answer. I think that I have had the opportunity to replay the events and to look back. I really would have loved to see more of a collaborative effort. I think that perhaps would have come from from more experience, more political experience, as well as more leadership experience. At the end of the day, there were different dynamics and different factors and different variables that perhaps influence certain conduct and behavior, that we saw that the leader did not want to bend, and she felt that being the leader of the party, she did not have to. For me, I do not know if that approach was the best approach or if it even was a wise approach. I would have done things very differently had I been in her shoes and she was asking me to have a say in the senator. When you are negotiating and you have to consider things that other people are putting forward, and which they are entitled to do because they are people, they're part of the process, and so you can accommodate them, I would have looked to see what would have been the greater good and goal for the party. And so I don't think that it would have been too detrimental for me to really compromise as it relates to choosing a senator on the opposition bench. I don't see that as being something that would have perhaps lead to the breakdown in the party, so to speak. I definitely would not have allowed that if I was in her position.
Were there was information surfacing following that whole episode or feud, if you will? One begin to wonder whether or not those discussions did not surface before the election as to who will likely be a senator, who will likely be a consultant, advisor, etc.
What I can say and what I can disclose is that those discussions never took place in my presence. I don't know if other discussions were had outside of my presence, but they never took place in my presence.
Having that exposed now, what is your view? Do you think that they took place outside of your presence?
I cannot say for certain. I honestly don't
know. Did you get the feeling that some way, somehow, not within your knowledge, that other senators or persons were already earmarked?
I do believe so. I believe what transpired thereafter. At that time, that really was not my thinking. Now, looking at the whole thing and being able to reflect upon it now, holistically, of course, there must have been negotiations that would have taken place, perhaps outside, maybe even before the election, or perhaps immediately thereafter.
Maybe for mischievous means or purposes. That there were groups within the group.
And perhaps there were, and that would always be a natural consequence of an organization. I don't think that it was unique to NRP per se. Of course, you would always have persons, and people are people, and people would always be people, Mr. Herbert. There would always be people with different interests, people with different ulterior motives, and so that's a natural consequence of being a part of any organization.
And if it's a part of any organization, you would agree, though, that it doesn't bring down all organizations.
It doesn't bring down
some
all.
Have the ability
yes.
to withstand it, and as you said, negotiate and bring it through.
Because it doesn't bring down all organizations, because at the end of the day, it has to do with the overarching goal. If the overarching goal really is, and in politics, it must always be the people. So if the focus really is on the people, that is the people who you represent in the masses, the lay persons, okay? The single mothers, single fathers, what have you. If it is that the overarching interests are being able to represent and be an advocate for those people, then what is taking place internally really should be fostered by that objective. Now, in any event and in any situation or in any organization or circumstance where that is not the objective, you will naturally have a breakdown. A breakdown is a natural consequence of that.
When people say that this situation evolved to what it did because you were not willing to compromise, you say what?
I said that that is not the case. I think I made a compromise. To what extent? Okay. I was
they argue
yes,
that you could and should have allowed Dr. Hodge to choose who the senator should be.
I perhaps could have, but again, because I was aware that I had a discretion, and because I was able, having been there in the past, having been there even before there was a Dr. Hodge, and understanding the contribution that I made to the party, understanding the circumstances that I endure in being able to make a contribution for NRP to retain a seat after the by-election, both financial and otherwise, and there were, many sacrifices made, Mr. Herbert, naturally. So being in that position to marry experiences, past experiences, to what is, I felt that I was in a position to negotiate, and to negotiate based on the extent of the value of what I brought to the table. And we have to remember, it's a collective process. When you put people together in an organization and you form a political party, at the end of the day, there may be common interests, there may be competing interests, but what is important is what is the overarching goal, and that really must be being able to advance the cause for the people, the general people, not just party supporters, not just members of the respective party, in this case NRP. I'm talking about the wider community of Nevis.
You put forth a name or person to be the senator.
I did.
And you held strongly to that person.
I wouldn't say I held strongly to that person. I supported that person.
All the way through?
Not necessarily all the way through. There became an instance where after we were not making any headway, both myself and the leader, as with the two persons who we had an interest in being the nominated senator, and that, as I explained some time back, that was Mr. Bartlett and Miss Merchant. We came to an agreement after a mediation session where we said, okay, we were not going to go anywhere with these two. We couldn't agree, and so let us consider other persons. I gave two other names, and so it would be unfair and perhaps dishonest for me to say that I held steadfast to that person, having realized that we weren't going to go anywhere, and you needed to get somewhere, because at the end of the day the goal really was to have a senator and move forward with this entire process so that you can move on to represent people. I was of the view, at least that was what was communicated to me, that Dr. Daniel would have done the same. And so we both agreed that after the mediation session that we would have looked at different persons. Okay, so I gave my name. I was waiting on her to respond. We actually tried to meet on several occasions so that we can have a meeting and we can really resolve this issue of the senator. But at the same time, whilst trying to resolve this issue of the senator, there was a almost simultaneous plan, I would call it a plan, initiation taking place, where the party, the executive, was moving to take disciplinary action against me for not supporting the leader of the party to be the leader of the opposition. And in my view, it was my view then, and it continued to be my view, that that is absolutely absurd, and it borders the parameters of lunacy. Because here it is that in law, and the Constitution is the supreme law of the land, and some person will say, well, Cleon, in politics people go on emotions and not necessarily what is legal in that sense. But I would say to that, okay, at the end of the day, if you are seeking and you are aspiring to be into government make laws, and so you must have that respect for the laws, the existing laws of the land, especially the supreme law of the land. So politics is not just about emotions, it's being able to demonstrate that you have the ability to understand what the law is, what the parameter of the law is, and as well that you respect it. Because if you cannot respect the law of the land when you're in opposition, if you can't respect it, then how do you expect people to follow and to respect laws when you get in government and you start to implement them? And that is what this entire process is. You are seeking to become a parliamentarian, not only in opposition but in government, and that's part and parcel of the mandate for government.
And you reference becoming a parliamentarian.
Yes.
And you've been referencing frequently the party, the Nevis Reformation Party in this. Where did the other candidates who seeking to be parliamentarians, where did they stand in all this?
I'm not certain. Because
clearly, after all, you presented yourself to the public as a unit, not only as a party, but as a managing unit. 5 candidates, hoping to be 5 representatives, and most of the communication that we got and we're having now from you centered mainly around yourself and Dr. Hodge. So I'm just wondering, where did the other...
Well, the other candidates were part of the executive body, and the executive body, as I mentioned in my address to the nation, the executive body was of the view, a matter of fact, the executive body voted that the leader of the party should be the leader of the opposition. And so we had a situation that occurred on the 29th of December where the executive body basically replaced or interjected themselves as the member, the other elected member, and made that decision for the other elected member. At no point did anyone think to ask, and to ask humbly, respectfully, and truthfully of the member as to, can you, the member, myself, support the leader in this regard? There was a demand, there was a mandate, there was a decision by the executive, and then at some point later, subsequently, there was a letter where the chairman of the party demanded that I should sign. And so here it is, there was no regard again for the discretion of the other elected member. It was as if, we don't hear you, we don't exist, you don't exist, this is what we want, and this is what should happen, and this is what is going to happen, and we are going to use every weapon to ensure that you do as we say. And so it no longer was a negotiation, there were no conversations, there was no longer a collaborative effort. It was a demand, do as I say, or else we will take disciplinary actions against you. And I'm simply saying that that is not the correct standard of behavior that one ought to expect in a democratic country.
Did it therefore surprise you in terms of what your expectation was in terms of how the party would respond to issues, problems?
Not necessarily. I must say I was not the least bit surprised. I was disappointed, but not necessarily surprised, because I have been around, I have observed the way the party dealt with certain issues in the past, and so I was not surprised. I knew precisely, and I kind of anticipated what would have been the outcome. Now, the question perhaps, Mr. Herbert, is whether I was intimidated to that extent. And some persons have said that, you know, they would have hoped that after that approach was taken, that I would have complied. Now, for me, I see things very differently, and I believe that if it is that you genuinely want to persuade somebody to do something, then you have to use the art of persuasion. Okay, you cannot take up a stick and beat that person. I remember reading a story one time of a lady and a gentleman on a horse, and he put a carrot before he wanted the horse to move, and he kept beating the horse, and the horse would not move, and he beating it. The horse would not move, obviously stubborn. And a lady came along, and she wanted the horse to move as well, and she put a carrot before the horse, and the horse moved. So again, it depends on the approach. What approach are you going to employ? Okay, you have to me, as leaders, people who put themselves up to represent people, at the end of the day, you have to be genuine in your approach. You have to understand that you must have respect for people at all times. People may not always agree with you, they may not always see your side, but as a politician, your job is to be able to persuade them, not to bully them, not to chastise them, not to demeanor them, not to bring them down. That does not work. It has never worked, and it perhaps will never work.
So, after many months, where is this? Where are we at?
Well, today it was made public that I am expelled from the party. I must say that I did expect it, so it's not didn't come as any surprise to me, and so that is the stage that we are at. I do not wish to speak too much about that, as I am still very much, as you can imagine, digesting it, but that is what the NRP has decided to do. I wish to put a full stop there. For me, the focus now is on the people being able to represent my constituents, and not just my constituents, but they being an advocate for the people of Nevis. At the end of the day, this has been a distraction, sadly to say, where I believe that the all stakeholders and the party have lost focus on the people, and you know, they have become so engaged in this, what I would coin as a cosmetic. Okay, because this just has to do with internal power and internal power struggles, has nothing to do with the people of Nevis, because at the end of the day, the people in my constituency, they are still looking for representation, and so that is my focus. My focus is being able to see how I can best adhere and support the people, how I can engage them, how I can find out what are their issues, and how I can help them, because people out there need help.
For the persons, of course, you did explain at the top of the program you're attorney by profession, so you understand the law and the Constitution. It speaks to this. You were expelled from the Nevis Reformation Party, so explain what that means in reference to you being the elected representative for the St. Thomas Parish.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Herbert, for that. It does not necessarily affect my representation per se. It simply means that I am no longer a representative or a member of the Nevis Reformation Party. I have many months ago declared myself when I went into the Parliament for the budget address because of the suspension. So NRP suspended me and I declared myself naturally because I had no other choice as an independent candidate. And so that continues. I continue to be the area representative. I am aware that NRP intends to field a different candidate for NRP in St. Thomas's, and so I believe now if an election was to call, there will be at least perhaps 3 persons contesting that seat in Nevis 5. So I continue to be the elected representative until such time that my tenure expires.
Do we know the candidate at this point in time who they intend to field? One election to be held tomorrow, for instance.
I cannot say officially that I am aware of that person, but I did see a post perhaps about 2 weeks ago from Mr. Rohan Iles, who has indicated that he is ready to help the people of St. Thomas's. Now, of course, we welcome all hands on deck in St. Thomas's, and so if it is that the constituency needs more people to help it, then surely we welcome that.
Mr. Iles, who ran in Gingerland,
I believe that's correct.
So you're saying it is not official as far as
I have not seen anything official. Not that I am really paying attention or focusing on that. I can just share what I would have seen. For me, the focus really is on me being able to represent people, being able to push certain agenda and ensure, as I have done in the past, ensure that the people of St. Thomas's, that they continue to be looked after and they continue to be provided with the type of representation that they truly deserve.
And for those who may be of the view that you will or should no longer be a representative because you ran on the NRP.
But I run on a NRP ticket with the policy and with the approach that I would represent people honestly, fairly, I would give of myself genuinely, and I will continue to do so until such time that my tenure expires.
And the Constitution,
to be honest with you, Mr. Herbert, I have not given that much thought. I do believe what I can say now is that it is my intention to defend the seat. Okay, but I cannot really say because, of course, it depends on a lot of factors. I do believe that Nevis needs something new. They need a bit of fresh air. They need people who are genuine in the approach to leadership and in the approach to serving people. I believe that I have demonstrated that I can serve in that capacity and I can bring that quality of representation to the table, and I intend to continue to do so.
How much of the support in St. Thomas's would you say is Cleone Simmons Stapleton because of your community work, because of your vision, because of your policies?
I cannot really say at this point.
Would you say that you have, without putting a figure, good support amongst your community?
I can say that the people understand, and they have been working with me in the past. I believe that they will continue to work with me. I believe that they have certain expectations of me. They expect me to be genuine. They expect me to be honest. They expect me to be fair. They expect me to always put their interest above everything else, even above a party. And so I will continue to do so, and I believe that is the expectation of the people of St. Thomas's, and that is precisely what I intend to continue to deliver. And Mr. Herbert, I wish to say that just months after being elected after the by-election in 2020, I established a foundation. It was then coined as the Lowland Community Foundation. I am now in the process of revamping that and making it bigger and better, so that I can have that avenue where I can serve the people of St. Thomas's. At the end of the day, all of this work, all of what I am doing here, the representation, the advocacy, the sacrifices that I am making, it would not make sense if at the end of the day it was not inspired and fueled by the people, the will of the people. When you look at St. Thomas's Parish, there's quite a lot to be done. Okay, the parish, I believe, has been somewhat, if I can say, to some extent neglected over the years, and so we want to change that. I believe that there is significant room for improvement in that particular constituency. When we look at the play fields or recreational facilities, they need improvement. The Cotton Ground play field, for example, it needs a bathroom facility. We have drainage problems. You have roads that needs to be fixed. I believe the children of St. Thomas's can really do with a playground. So there are things that can be done and needs to be done in the constituency of St. Thomas's, and so that really is my focus. My focus is really about engaging people and seeing how I can help to advance their lives and to make the constituency better at the end of the day.
And over the next few years, you intend to see whether or not you can get some of these things done.
Yes.
You're not in government, and so with that hope and expectation, some argue that you intend to join the Concerned Citizens movement. Some argue that you've been heavily influenced by Mr. Brantley, and as a consequence, those were the reasons why you did not cooperate with the Nevis Reformation Party.
I think people would always find excuses rather than looking at themselves and seeing what they could have done better, what their own internal weaknesses were. And if you're going to continue with excuses, then you would never be able to look at your institution, and I'm just speaking generally here, and be able to make the changes. But for me, people will say all manner of things that perhaps are not true or doesn't even make sense, but that is not my focus right now. You would always have the naysayers, you will always have the people out there trying to belittle you or dirty your name. That is the nature of politics. At the end of the day, what would speak wonders really is the performance, the ability to perform despite the challenges, despite the criticism. It's just being able to perform, and so my focus really is on the people. So I leave people to be able to make whatever form of judgment, to draw whatever conclusion they wish to make. Of course, they are entitled to do so, provided that they do not malign or slander my name, and those who have, of course, the necessary course of action will be taken in due course. But for me, the focus is not to get distracted with the talk. It's about keeping the momentum and being able to push forward and to bring things to the table for the people of St. Thomas's.
And if it is necessity to dialogue with Mr. Brantley, because he is the Premier, and because as a consequence they control the necessary resources, and because of your oath as a representative for St. Thomas's, you will converse with him.
Certainly, I have always done so. Since the inception when I was elected, I have always been an advocate, and I believe the Honorable Premier can allude to that. I have always advocated and asked.
Do you think
for things for my constituency,
that because you did that, you fell out of favor with someone in your party who did not think that approach should be used because you're on different sides?
Perhaps, but I mean, the nature of politics, and I'm talking about modern politics, the nature of politics in this modern world is really being able to collaborate and to have discussions and to advocate on behalf of the people. If you're going to stay in a corner within your space and within the comfort of your party, and all you're going to do is criticize, and you're not going to push anything forward or try to get support, or you don't understand that sometimes, even though it is politics, you have to form relationships, you have to beg, you have to advocate, okay, you have to solicit support, because you're not in government, you're in opposition. If persons don't understand that and they wish to stay within their corner, and that is their type of politics, then respectfully, I respect what they do. For me, I understand the bigger picture. I was fortunate enough to be invited to be part of a delegation that went, that accommodated the Honorable Prime Minister, Dr. Terence Ju, to Taiwan late last year. And for me, that experience really was an eye-opener, because to see the Prime Minister being able to put a team together where there were different party interests, but at the end of the day, we were able to go to Taiwan as a delegation. And from what I can see, at that point, when we represented St. Kitts and Nevis, there was no distinction. No one, if you didn't know, would or could have seen that the Prime Minister had a delegation of persons who represented different party interests. We all went into the same space. We understood the objective. We understood that we were the Prime Minister's guests. And I can tell you, there was absolute cohesion. We all were able to exist in the same space and to promote the objective of the Prime Minister, as well as the agenda of St. Kitts and Nevis. And so I believe that is modern day politics. You expect, yes, the politics, the political nature, but I believe that has its time and its place. There are times when you have to collaborate, there are times when you have to communicate, and you have to dialogue in order for you to be able to best represent the interests of the people who you represent.
The Honorable Cleone Stapleton Simmons. When we come back, your phone calls on 1-869-469-1616-1700 for the Honorable Cleone Stapleton Simmons. Back after these.
Builders Paradise is offering a large variety of floor and wall tiles at very competitive prices. Builders Paradise has over 2 million pieces in stock, lots of different styles to choose from. Whether you're renovating or tiling a new house, Builders Paradise has what you need. Wow! Oh, and remember, we're open all day Saturday to serve you better. This is something that you can't refuse. Visit Builders Paradise today at the C.A. Paul Southwell Industrial Site in St. Kitts, or call them at 466-4938.
With all the power from the tower, this is the powerhouse of the Eastern Caribbean, VON Radio, from the Federation of St. Kitts and Nevis.
Back on this episode of Thought That Get Results with the Honorable Cleone Stapleton Simmons. Your phone calls on 1-869-469-1616 and or 1700. The constituency of St. Thomas's. At this point in time, what is the feedback amongst the constituents? Having, some time pass, but they're going back and forth and stuff like that. What's your gauge?
Perhaps my gauge is I really don't know. Persons have been very supportive. There are some people who don't understand and who feel that there has been a rift. persons have different views. For the most part, I try my best to explain the situation to persons. There are some persons who are very much aggrieved by the whole impasse issue and how it was dealt with. For the most part, I believe people felt that there should have been a compromise and that the matter should have been resolved internally. I believe that would have been the sensible thing to do. And so, I mean, there are mixed feelings. What I can say is that I do have the support of those persons who I would have gone to and I would have spoken to and I would have taken time to explain the situation. I try to engage people and to let them know that politics is not about dictatorship. There's no absolute and ultimate ruler or leader. We have to collectively respect people, respect what they bring to the table, and ensure that, you know, you can always foster a spirit of collaboration. And I think from my view, for the most part, people understand that. Now, of course, there has always been, and I would not sit here, Mr. Herbert, and pretend that I have always had the support of everybody in the constituency. I've had situations where even my very own executive in the St. Thomas's constituency, where they have been strongly against me, and I can say for some of them from day one. For me, I don't take that. I take that with a grain of salt, I must say, because at the end of the day, people will be people, okay? I believe that I have a very good understanding of people, and I know there are some people, no matter what you do, they will never be pleased, especially if they have ulterior motives. And so that is just the nature of people, okay? I can't make people like me. Some would like me, some would not like me. At the end of the day, it is what it is when you're dealing with people. And so for me, I don't walk around, you know, seeking people adoration or approval. I help people to understand, and where they don't understand, I help to educate, okay? And if by educating them they can see the light, they understand, then, you know, we can foster and have a dialogue and have communication and have mutual respect. At the end of the day, it's about respect. People may not agree with the stance that I took, but at the end of the day, I just wish to encourage people to always respect everybody in society. Okay, it is very important for us to respect each other as human beings. And I have seen some things and I have experienced some things, Mr. Herbert, which clearly tells me that as a society, we do have a lot of work to do in order to get people to that point where they can understand that you can agree to disagree, but you don't have to be disrespectful. And I have seen my former party, the NRP, clearly with some of its supporters and executive members demonstrating a type of behavior that I do not wish to be associated with. Okay, I do not believe that there is a place for hostility and for maligning people and attacking people and bringing down people, especially people who would have sacrificed to push your agenda when it was convenient for you. I do not think that people should be treated in that way. I would not treat people in that way, and so that is why some persons have said, well, Cleone, you have been silent. I said, yes, that is my approach. I do not believe that I need to go down in the gutter, so to speak, and perhaps for lack of a better phrase, with those kind of things. That is not who I am. That would never be who I am. That is not what I promised the people of St. Thomas's when I asked them for their vote. Okay, so that standard, that type of behavior, I strongly condemn it. I do not support it. I believe that we can all have amicable discussions, and at the end of the day, the goal really should be to try to find an amicable solution. So if that is not the spirit of any organization, then I really cannot be part of that. And so maybe at the end of the day, the way how things turned out, it was indeed maybe a blessing in disguise.
So you have no regrets in reference to the stands that you took?
Yes, I have absolutely no regrets. I believe in what I did. I stand firm by it. And if I had to do it again, I would certainly do it again. I think we are in a democratic country, and we have to understand as leaders that we are operating in a democracy. There's no absolute entitlement to anything. You have to work, you have to make your contribution, and you have to be able to persuade people. Okay, you don't beat down people and you don't trample them down. It was quite interesting to learn that the reason for my expulsion from the NRP is because I did not support the leader. At the end of the day, you know, it is just interesting, Mr. Herbert. That's all I can say on that at this point.
You spoke in reference to explaining your position to people, maybe sometimes one-on-one, your constituents. Have you found that in doing so, people do understand, having gotten, and hopefully as they would tonight, because I also believe that, you know, when you tell people your truth, and you know, at least I said your truth, meaning people will always say, well, oh, but that's your truth. But, you know, your side of the story, so to speak. And sometimes when they match it up against what they were hearing, sometimes they don't understand.
Yes, that really has been my experience when I talk to people one-on-one and I explain the whole thing to them and I tell them what happened and what really was the motivating factor behind it. You know, some people are surprised. They couldn't believe that is because they're hearing so many noise. Oh, you know, I really have not done anything wrong. There has been no misconduct, and I am happy by putting out this statement and the release that they put out today, that it said because I failed to support the leader of the party to be the leader of the opposition, and there were no other nuances or misconduct. So I am grateful for that, because they really couldn't say that. I believe I have given to the party tremendously. I've made tremendous sacrifices. No one talking about, well, what about the sacrifices that she make financially and otherwise? But at the end of the day, you know, I did it for the love, not for myself, not for the party, but for the people. And so it is something that, you know, I have no regret in doing, because like I said, I continue to serve and to represent the people of St. Thomas's, and I do believe that they do need me.
By the way, if you would like to ask Mrs. Simmons a question of your own, you can call now on 1-869-469-1616 or 1700. The other notes that I'm picking up, are you going to form a political party of your own?
I have no intention to do so at this point, but what I would say is that the future is bright. I'm always optimistic, and you know, I do not limit myself in any way, and so you know, we have to wait and see, Mr. Herbert, what the future holds.
Okay, somebody wants to ask you a question of their own, which is good. Good evening, you're on the air.
Hello, Mr. Herbert.
Yes, you're on the air, go ahead.
Yeah, I want to ask the lady, what was the breaking point? Was the breaking point reached when a decision could not be made with regard to the appointment of the senator? Was that the breaking point, or did it come before? And when I say the breaking point, the point of no return. I'll hang up.
Okay, thank you.
Same question. I myself do not know when the breaking point took place, because at the end of the day, for me, when you look at the sequence of events, I was of the view that negotiations would have continued, and eventually we had agreed to come to an amicable solution. Surprisingly, within days of that, I received a letter from by the bailiff to, not by the bailiff, I believe it was delivered by the party secretary to my office, that I was suspended from the party. So my natural expectation and what we were working towards after the mediation session on the 30th, and just to let people know the sequence of events. So the parliament, the inauguration of parliament, it took place on the 19th of January. That was a Thursday. On the 20th of January, I was served by the bailiff at my house with a letter from the chairman of the party, stating that I should sign a letter to indicate that I supported Dr. Daniel Hodge. And then after that, there was a break. I did not sign the letter, as everyone perhaps knew, because I absolutely think that it was out of place for any person to demand that I just sign a letter without any type of consultation or discussion. And I must say that even during the executive decision of the 29th and to that point where I was served with the letter, there was no communication, there was no dialogue. Okay, no one took the time out to say, okay, well, we have an issue here. How can we treat with this issue, or how can we deal with it? Absolutely nothing.
Did you see? You keep referencing in this matter the party or the executive. Did you see the Dr. Hodges' leadership come shining through?
I must say that I really didn't. It was more like influences from the party or the executive. Okay, now I cannot say whether what were her views outside of the party. I really did not see that. Those things were not communicated to me.
During this issue, did you have any or many one-on-ones with Dr. Hodge?
Initially, before the parliament, so before the January 19th, we had some one-on-one conversation. Thereafter, after the mediation session that took place on January 29th, I believe it was, that was the last conversation that we had as it relates to this matter, because the next step thereafter, there was a general council meeting. The matter was not discussed at the general council meeting. I thought it would have been, it was not. And then thereafter, the party took steps to basically throw me out of the party. I was suspended on February 8th, and then nothing took place during that time. I received 2 notifications of a parliamentary hearing, a complaint from the party stating that they wanted to take disciplinary actions against me from the newly formed disciplinary committee that was formed at the general council meeting on the 30th. Thereafter, I responded, I believe, within those 3 or 4 months. I don't even remember how long it was, but it was at least 3 months. I responded and I indicated that I would not participate in any disciplinary sham. I wish to use the word sham, disciplinary proceedings, because I do not think that they were necessary. There was no cause of action. There was no action to discipline, because I believe that I was acting within my constitutional right. If anything, I believe that perhaps the leader and NRP ought to be disciplined for infringing on my constitutional right. So I believe that it's a little bit twisted. But in any event, thereafter, you come on the 28th or the 29th, or it could have been the 30th, sometime thereafter this month, I was served from the magistrate bailiff with a letter stating that I have been expelled from the party. Okay. So that was a trend of events. So I don't really know when the breakdown took place, because I was expecting negotiations.
Good evening. Thank you for holding.
Good evening to you and your guest. This almost sounds like a clash of 2 personalities, and that's unfortunate, because in our system, a party consists of a subset of people, and they too are entitled to a say, And ideally, some consensus should have been arrived at. Just like how she said that politics should be about give and take, it is also about yielding to the prevailing party decisions as guided by things like the party's constitution or just for the greater good of Nevis. I would like to know if your guest actually flee, right? I think it's more about the people and less about the politicians and personalities. The people didn't vote for this debacle, and you notice that she hedged a bit when you ask about the support that she thinks she has in the constituency. I would have thought, and she can comment on this, that the principal thing to do is to resign and contest as an independent rather than as the NRP candidate that she did at first. Because to do otherwise just seems somewhat opportunistic and not consistent with the democratic principles of representation in our system. Okay, so that's the question. Does she really feel comfortable saying that she represents the people of St. Thomas's, bearing in mind that this was not part of the campaign that she launched at first? Okay, that would be my question.
Okay, Colin, might I ask you a question before you go?
Sure.
Right, you said that it is what is practiced in the system. You agree that we have a lot of recent examples where persons were elected under a party ticket and then left that party and continued to serve. You're aware of that?
Yes,
okay.
I'm aware that the Constitution provides for that.
And we have had repeat examples of that. You agree with that?
Yes,
okay.
But the bigger picture, the bigger question, does that serve the interest?
Yeah, I understand that, but I just, you were referencing...
Yes, there's no question that she has that right.
Work with me.
Mm-hmm.
What I'm saying is that just to put it into perspective so that not just Ms. Simmons but the general public would understand, and those who do not know the history of St. Kitts and Nevis and the practice, I just wanted to know whether you're aware that we have had a lot of examples of that.
Yes.
Okay.
And you know too, right, that the Constitution, because that was
allows it,
mentioned
yes,
pretty often, allows also for a leader of the opposition. And I don't think the interests of the democracy is served when there is not when that is not provided for.
right.
Okay. Yeah.
All right, Ms. Simmons.
Yeah, I wish to just address the caller. And caller, I wish to thank you for your question and for your comments. I certainly do appreciate them.
Just keep that note, Mrs. Simmons, because I really wanted folks to talk to you.
Okay.
Right? So keep that note. Good evening. Thank you for holding.
Yes, good evening, Mr. Webbo. And good evening to Mrs. Stapleton.
Mrs. Stapleton, yes.
Yeah. In
Simmons.
terms of representation, I would differ a bit. Something that the last caller said, that the best thing to do is for her to resign and contest the election as an independent. But you see, what you have to take into consideration, Mrs. Stapleton, she didn't resign from the party, and that is why I have to disagree. Because I think this matter could have been solved since January, when it was brewing. You understand? I think, a little bit more effort could have put into it, and, we would not have been at this position that we are right now. The main fact, she was first suspended, and then she was we learned that she's expelled. It's not a case that, she won the ticket on a NRP. She won the seat on a NRP ticket, and then she's moving away from the party. I tend to disagree. They are the ones who suspended her and then expelled her, and I think she should serve out her time.
Okay.
That's my contribution.
Okay, thank you, Mrs. Simmons.
Yes, I just wish to thank that caller again for his contribution, and I wish to just address the two questions. The first caller mentioned that the principles of democracy, and there can be no greater example of democracy being tested than this particular scenario. And it is a testament to the democracy and the rights afforded to us under the Constitution. The second question, that the issue that the caller raised, is whether I should raise. And Mr. Herbert, I'm treading very cautiously because my job here tonight is not really to belittle NRP. I can say some things and I can give people the real true picture as to what took place in contesting the election. For example, as far as I am aware, I contested the number 5 seat in the last election almost as an independent candidate. I can disclose that. I do not wish to go into the nitty-gritty because, again, it would not put the NRP in a good light. Now, some may say, Cleon, that is not your concern. They just expelled you. But that really is not the standard for me. At the end of the day, there are invisible variables that people are not seeing. For example, I would have gone out, secured my own funding in order to fund my campaign in both elections, both the by-elections as well as this past election. I would have invested my own monies into ensuring that I am able to be re-elected, because of course I had an interest in it. So I hear people often come and talk about this thing about, oh, you run on a party ticket with a party policies, and sometimes I want to ask them, when I was out there sacrificing myself and my time to ensure that the party was put in a position, as well with my other colleagues, to be in government, where was the leadership of the party? Where was the leadership of the party to provide resources? Where was the leadership of the party to provide strategy to win an election? I didn't say that. Okay, but like I said, Mr. Herbert, I do not wish to go down there because there are 2 and 3 and perhaps 4 sides to every story. But there are things that took place internally that people, perhaps if they had the full story, they would really understand. So you cannot just look at things from just a party perspective. You have to look at it from as well as the individual's contribution. What did they put in? Nobody asking that. Okay, who is going to be able to reimburse that person if they were to resign for their time, the monies, the effort, the sacrifices that they put in to really ensure that they were able to garner the support of the people in the constituency?
In short, are you suggesting that when you put forth as a party on the campaign trail of you being cohesive, unified, unison, and the best team to put in government, it was not so?
That's my respectful view. There could have been improvements.
In this particular episode, who had the greater responsibility, if you will, to get this problem solved? The leader, yourself, the executive, who?
I believe it would have been certainly, and like I said, that really falls upon the leadership of the party. Now, the leadership of the party comprised of both the leader as well as the other members of the executive. But I am just simply saying that sometimes, there is gaps in the story, things are not revealed. That really ought not be the focus, because at the end of the day, you went into an election, you contested it, you asked people to support you because they believe in you. Some believe in the party, some believe in the candidate. You may not know, but people were inspired to vote a particular way, and they must have voted in that way because the seat was won by the Nevis Reformation Party. But that is not to say that the individual person who went out there, because the party cannot go out there and speak to people. The party cannot persuade people. It has to be that person. And Mr. Herbert, you know, and the callers know, opportunity to serve you, to serve your interests. This is who I am. This is what I am able to bring to the table. Okay, that was my message. So I am just simply saying that we have to look at things from a holistic perspective, not just our own in isolation as a party. Because who make up a party? It has to be the individuals with their character, with their values, with their ambitions, with their goals. You can have a party filled with people who cannot win, who people do not vote for, who may not even make an impact, whereas you can have a party collectively with individuals who people like, who inspire people, who motivate people, who people believe in, and so people give them that support. So it is the people, the individual people who make up the party, and they too have a contribution, and they have made their contribution. So I want people to take all of those things into consideration. And as the last caller said, why would I resign when I did not do anything? Penal actions were taken against me, which is quite historic in our democracy. We have never seen this, where the NRP has decided to throw away 50% of their elected representative, 50%, because someone chose not to give support, because I have always indicated that I would support her, but because the leader failed to adhere to the conditions, because she felt that being the leader she had an absolute automatic entitlement. It doesn't work that way.
Okay, let me take this. Good evening, thank you for holding.
Good night, Mr. Robert.
Yes.
And good night to Lady. I refer to you as CSS. Since last year. CSS.
Thank you.
I'm the gentleman who called from St. Kitts last year. Mr. Robert, I just called to support my lady. You see, with this give and take thing, I totally support you 100%. Because if you support the other party to be the leader, how come she couldn't support you to choose a senator? I clearly see what you're saying. I've been listening from the beginning, and I support that give and take thing. That's all I want to say. And keep it up. Just look how I support you 110%, and last year up to now, I still support you.
Thank you so much.
All right,
good night.
Thank you. 1-869-469-1616 or 1700. In our remaining minutes, you are not attached to the Nevis Reformation Party now. Where else can people hear of you, find you, whatever?
Certainly, I continue to be the elected representative for Nevis 5. People generally know where to find me, so I continue to reside at Cotton Ground. There may be future plans for me to have a constituency office in the constituency for people to be able to reach me at that particular space and time. But for now,
what's the position with the leader of the opposition office?
Okay, so and just to briefly to discuss that, the office of the opposition has been closed down, so to speak. The premier did allude to that in his press conference, and he would have subsequently written and give notice that he would close down the office of the opposition. The government can no longer continue to fund it. Now, part and parcel of the reason for that is because of the impasse and the fact that due to the suspension and now subsequent expulsion from the NRP, I am now an independent representative of the people. And so Dr. Daniel Hodge, as the leader of the NRP, she now represents the interests of the NRP. Now, when the office was set up back in 2017, when Mr. Parry was the then sole member of parliament for the NRP, the office was really set up with the intention to provide an outlet or an avenue for persons to engage the member of the opposition. And so the government Not that they were required to do so, but extended some courtesies to Mr. Parry to have an office of the opposition, even though at that time there was no leader of the opposition. Those same courtesies were extended to myself naturally, even though I was the lone parliamentarian in the opposition. Similarly, that arrangement continued, and when Dr. Daniel won her seat, she then, after the impasse issue, wrote to the Honorable Premier requesting and demanding that she be allowed to get certain benefits for the NRP. And so she wrote a letter demanding that all correspondences and anything pertaining to the office of the opposition as it relates to NRP be forwarded to her for her attention. Now, for anyone who understands what the office of the opposition is, and I know for the most part in our history we have had a two-party system, but the office of the opposition really is a government office, okay? And so it is for the elected opposition under the Constitution. If there was a leader, it would have been the office of the leader of the opposition. Because there's no leader, it's just the office of the opposition, but it is a government institution, so it is not there for any particular party per se. It just so happened that at that time, and in my time, NRP had the lone member of the opposition.
So in effect, if there were two members of the opposition who were from different parties,
yes,
who were not in a quarrel,
yes,
there could be an office that both of them can share.
Yes.
Because it's the office
because
of the
it is
opposition.
the office of the opposition, not for a party.
You think that we put too much personal stuff into professional stuff?
I think so. And I think sometimes it's just a lack of understanding. People just not taking the time out to understand and perhaps educate themselves as to what, you know, the office is and how the structure of government works. Okay, and all these things are outlined, you know, in the Constitution, the parameters.
Have you found, because I've found that through the years, and I alluded to it earlier, have you found if you take the time sometimes to explain to people, because I always say the public is not stupid.
Yes.
And if you explain to them the truth and what it is, you find people understand.
I have found that. I find people understand, and it's part of the good governance agenda. You know, part of our job as representative and as leaders is really to educate people. Some people manipulate that process where they only push certain agendas, and so you'll hear them on talk shows creating mischief, not really seeking to educate persons. I don't know if it is for lack of ability or just being able to wanting to be malicious. But if you take time out and educate people, then people would understand and surely appreciate the office of the opposition has nothing to do with NRP. Okay, NRP, yes, may have been in opposition at that time, but that's at the party level. The office now is a government office, and so this is now at the parliamentary level, and there is a distinction.
Okay, you have the last word.
Yes, I just wish to thank you, Mr. Herbert, for giving me the opportunity to come and talk to you and to talk to the people of Nevis. I do hope that you would invite me to do so again. I wish to say thank you to the good people of St. Thomas's, of course, always for their love and their support. I wish to thank my family, my friends, and everyone who have really been out there providing that support that I so needed during, you know, this very difficult time. I want to thank all those who believe in what I was trying to do on the stance that I took, and even those who don't believe but who may come around with time. I just wish to thank them. I am indeed grateful for the opportunity, and I just wish to say that I continue as the elected representative for Nevis 5 to be there for the people. I continue to advocate on their behalf and to ensure that I can put the necessary mechanisms in place in order to be able to support people and to be of some help to them, because the people really do need help, especially in these tough economic times. So I just wish to say that I continue to work on behalf of the people. I'm quite excited about the new initiative, and in the upcoming weeks I should be launching a nice program, a program that would benefit all people, not just the people in St. Thomas's, but the wider community of Nevis. So I look forward to working with all the stakeholders in order to ensure that, you know, we can really bring some sort of meaningful help and comfort to the people of Nevis. So I look forward to doing that, and I just want to thank everybody always for their love and support as I continue in my initiative to really advance the cause for the people, especially the young people of Nevis.
Let me answer your request to come back again. We got some simple rules, and you work with us, you're in. You don't, I'm out.
Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. This program repeats tomorrow at 10 o'clock following the VON News Minute. Join the Honorable Mark Brantley tomorrow evening at 8 o'clock for On the Mark. Thank you all again for joining us. This is your voice in the community. Talk that get results. You all have a wonderful evening.
Views and opinions expressed on the program are solely those